last time I was here, so a couple weeks ago, we talked about the Southeast Pollinator Census that's
Yep.
happening in August.
Right.
I wanted to kind of follow that up with today. There's a Southeast Bumblebee Atlas project. There are actually several different species of bumblebees that are either endangered or listed as imperiled. And I guess imperiled is one step above endangered.
Right. Yeah. They're in peril of being eliminated. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
that makes sense.
what the Southeast Bumblebee Atlas project is doing is they're teaching people how to identify bees or getting people to take pictures of bees and send them in so that those bees can be identified. Excuse me. And then we can identify where those bees are at, how many there are in the area,
Okay.
to find out if their area of activity is shrinking or not.
Wow. All right. How many varieties of bumblebees are there?
I don't know how many varieties there are. I know there's at least 16.
Well, I didn't know that. I mean, really.
But there's
a bumblebee is a bumblebee to me.
yeah, for me too. But I'm learning that there are big differences. There's one that's called a rusty patch bumblebee that's on the endangered species list, and that one I'm not even sure if it's in our area here or not because I haven't really seen one. But it's got an orange patch of hair on its abdomen. That's where it gets its rusty
I've
patch.
never wanted to get close enough to find out what's on the abdomen of a bumblebee. I don't know. Maybe I should be a little less concerned. I'm not sure.
Well, for the most part, bumblebees are not very aggressive. And so as long as
Until
you're not...
you turn them over to look at their abdomen, that might change.
Well, as long as you're not threatening them, trying to hold on to them, something like that, they should be very docile, and they'll just sit there on the flower, or they'll fly away or whatever. But one of the things that they do with this project is they teach you how to catch them, transfer them into a little tube, and then put them on ice for about 15 to 20 minutes until they're cold enough to where they'll sit still, but not so cold enough that they die. And then you can dump them out of the little vial, take a couple of pictures so that you can see the different parts of them so that they can be identified a whole lot easier than trying to take a picture of them while they're flying from flower to flower.
Okay. Bumblebee Atlas. Is there a website?
Yes, if you'll Google Bumblebee Atlas Project, there is a website.
Okay.
And this article that I printed out doesn't have the website listed, but it does.
Google will take care of it for you. That's part of artificial intelligence now.
That was how I found the website. Was I just typed in Southeast Bumblebee Atlas Project.
Southeast Bumblebee
Atlas Project.
Okay.
Yes.
You know, we've talked about this in the past, and of course the role that bees play as pollinators, and we'll talk about that in a moment, related to this being, was it National Pollinating Month?
National Pollinator Month.
National Pollinator Month. Okay. Bumblebees versus honeybees. There is a distinct difference.
Yes.
Okay. Do bumblebees do they have honey? Do they also create nests, things of that nature? I mean,
bumblebees will create nests or hives or whatever you want to call it. They are social insects, so they do have areas where there's several of them in one area. They don't produce honey because they generally feed on pollen instead of nectar. So they don't bring the nectar back. They usually feed on pollen.
Okay, I'm going to express ignorance. I always thought nectar and pollen were the same thing.
Pollen is what gets transferred from the anther of the flower to the stigma of the flower to create fertilization.
Okay.
Nectar is the juicy stuff down in the bottom of the flower that the honeybees and a lot of other pollinators go for to provide energy because it has lots of sugars in there. And so there's a big difference between the two. Some insects feed on the pollen. Most insects feed on the nectar.
Okay. Recognizing the importance of bumblebees, are they, up in the top level of pollinators? I mean, what is the most valuable pollinator, if you will?
Bumblebees do a wider range of flowers than bumblebees do. Let's see. Yeah, honeybees do a wider range of flowers than bumblebees do. But bumblebees, when they land on a flower, they buzz. So they do a sonic vibration. And so with flowers such as peppers and tomatoes and other solanaceous crops, Solanaceous crops have a really small flower opening, and so when the bees, the bumblebees land on there, they vibrate, do their sonic thing,
Mm-hmm.
and that vibrates the pollen off of the anther. Some of it lands on the stigma, and some of it falls out of the flower, and the bumblebees are able to collect that and feed on that.
Okay. All right. I mentioned a moment ago National Pollinator Month.
Right.
Isn't pollinating month? What's the background on that?
I'm not sure of the exact source of that, but
Okay.
I do know that for a long time, since the early 90s, people have been concerned about the reduced number of pollinators that they're seeing. So the reduced number of bees and wasps and butterflies and things that go and visit the
Mm-hmm.
flowers. They've been concerned about why those have been reduced or why they're dropping down in numbers. And are they going to just completely disappear? Because without the pollinators, a lot of the foods that we eat, the apples, the citrus, a lot of those foods that we eat, if we didn't have pollinators, we wouldn't be able to
Right.
get those fruits.
As a matter of fact, you've talked about this. In our gardens, you've suggested that we create areas that are conducive to or it promotes.
Invite the other pollinators
Yeah,
to come. Yes,
yeah.
that helps because if you have the flowers to bring them in, then they'll visit all of the flowers in the area and not just the one flower.
Okay. And we'll talk about this in relationship to the Bradford pear in a moment. Are there pollinators that don't get along? Let's say bumblebees and honeybees, for example, or bumblebees and wasps. Are there areas where you're only going to have one kind of pollinator, for example?
I don't know if when they're out visiting the flowers. I don't think so. I know that there are issues with some pollinators attacking the hives of other pollinators. So there are wasps that will go into beehives and just decimate a beehive. But I don't know that happens out on the flowers.
Okay. All right. And then I mentioned a moment ago the topic of bees and pollinators. Are there pollinators that, for example, don't visit certain plants? I'm going to pick on Bradford pears. I don't think that Bradford pears are attractive to bees, are they?
No, a lot of sometimes what the pollinators are looking for is they'll go to the flower based on the scent.
Okay.
And if you've ever smelled the Bradford pear flower, it doesn't smell yummy. It kind of smells like rotting meat or rotting fish. And so those flies that usually will lay their eggs on that kind of stuff, the rotting meat or whatnot, will visit those flowers more frequently or a lot better than say a bee that likes the pollen or likes the nectar, so that they can take that back, because the flowers of the Bradford pear and other plants that have that rotten smelling flower
Are
to
there
them.
Plants other than I'm throwing a curve at you.
Yes, there are. If you have ever smelled the flowers of a pyracantha, it has that same rotting flesh odor to it. Just last week or the week before, there was a corpse flower up at NC State that has that awful rotting flesh smell to it as well. So there are other plants that have that awful smell. I think most of them are in the rose family, and you would think of roses as smelling really sweet, but pyracantha, pear, apples are all in that same family. Apples don't have that awful smell, but they're in that same family.
All right. I'm learning something here. Sean Banks of Carter County's Cooperative Agriculture Extension Agency here on Coastal Gardener. It's Coastal Gardener on the Talk Station FM 107.1. And joining us today, Sean Banks. He is the Carter County agent for the Carter County Cooperative Agriculture Extension Agency. He's smiling. I finally got the cooperative into the title. We were just talking about pollinators and this being National Pollinating Month. The other aspect of this, and you talked a few moments ago about the, I don't want to remind folks about the Bumblebee Atlas Project. In essence, it's taking a census, if I understand this correctly, of bees, of pollinators.
Right. It's a citizen science project where they're trying to get people to go out and identify the bees by taking pictures of them, not necessarily capturing and killing, but taking pictures of the bees, or the bumblebees especially, and helping them to identify which ones are located in which areas.
Okay. Do they have sort of an idea of where they're located? Is there a sort of natural territories?
There are some natural territories, but what
Okay.
they're doing is they're finding that some of those natural areas that have been developed have disappeared, and some of those bumblebees have transferred or gone to other areas.
You know, you used the term a moment ago, developed, and let's talk about that because what's happening now is we're seeing more land being clear cut. Obviously, homes being built, roadways, sidewalks, etc. So it seems to me that this is a subtle way of saying to us, the homeowners, how about putting out flowers and plants that will be attractive to and will sustain these pollinators and such as honeybees and bumblebees and wasps and so forth.
Yes, and that's what we're trying to do is make people aware of the pollinators that are out there and what they can do. There are bee houses or bee hotels that you can
Really?
purchase or build for bees that carpenter bees that build their nests inside wood or.
Do carpenter bees, are they pollinators?
Yes, carpenter bees do go around and pollinate. So you'll see the carpenter bees on flowers quite often. Occasionally I'll see them visit my squash flower, but most of the time those are squash bees, which is a smaller member of that same species of not species, but genus of bees as the carpenter bee. But there are a lot of different kinds of bees and wasps that will build their nest inside little tubes or stuff like that. And so you can build your own and find out more about how to build houses and places for the bees to dwell. In my backyard, I've got a whole colony. Even though they're solitary, I've got probably 25 to 30 holes for ground nesting bees that come out in the spring, and they can be. My wife doesn't appreciate it because they dig up the soil and it covers up the mulch.
Let's talk about bees that live in the ground. What are they called? But just
Well, they're ground nesting bees.
ground nesting bees. Okay, you're out cutting the grass. Does that in any way interrupt the bee home?
Depending on which kind of bee it is, if you happen to get a ground hornets, the yellow jackets that burrow down into the soil and build their nest down there, you might have them chasing you on the lawnmower.
You better believe it.
But a lot of these solitary bees, like the ones that I have, when I'm mowing the grass early in the spring and they're out doing their thing, they'll just stop going in and out of the hole until I stop mowing.
Okay, how can I tell which kind I've got?
If they chase you, that's probably the ground
Thank
hornets.
you very much. I'm talking about, I would like to know before they chase me.
If you can see the hole where they're going in and out of there as you're walking around your grass before you start mowing, the hornets will have a small entrance hole that they're coming in and out of, and you'll see a lot of them going in and out.
Okay.
A lot of the solitary bees, they're not going to worry about you. They're more interested about building their nest, providing it for their young, or provisioning it for their young, and so they'll just be one bee going, or one wasp going in and out of that hole. So if you see more than one going in and out, it's a solitary bee, and they're not going to bother you unless you try to grab a hold of them or step on the hole with your bare feet or something like that. They're just more interested in doing what they need to do to provide for their young.
Okay. Do bees have natural predators?
Yes.
And wasps particularly, because I'm not bees I can deal with. The wasp and yellow jackets are another problem, but we'll talk about that. I'm just curious. They wasp and yellow jackets, and they're all the same pretty much. Mm-hmm. They are pollinators. Dirt daubers too.
Yes, a lot of those you'll see a lot of those different the hornets, the wasps, the bees. You'll see a lot of those on the flowers. Flowers that they usually will visit are usually going to be the flowers like a daisy or a sunflower. It's called in the aster family, where they have a head where they have rays around the outside and little tiny flowers on the inside. And they'll go to visit those flowers quite frequently. So if you have something like a rudbeckia, which is black-eyed Susan, or an echinacea, or a sunflower, or some kind of a daisy that has ray flowers around the outside, you'll if you watch those flowers long enough, you'll see bumblebees and wasps and
Okay.
hornets and just about everything go
All
to
right.
those flowers.
Back to the question on predators. Are there natural predators for bees?
There are. I have seen some predatory stink bugs feeding on a huge wasp. It was a European hornet actually, and there were two of the predatory stink bugs that were feeding on the European hornet. I saw the hornet and just kind of backed away a little bit, and then saw the fact that the stink bugs were feeding on that, and so that really helps to be able to say yes, there are predators. The praying mantids are indiscriminate feeders, so if a wasp comes in close enough to that, he'll
Wow.
they'll attack those as well. So,
But I'm thinking a wasp is so quick, and you'd think that, all right,
but the praying
Praying
mantids are really quick too. They're going to get in there. And usually, what they'll do is they'll get in there and then bite the head off before they have a chance to get stung.
wow. All right. We're talking with Sean Banks again, the Carter County cooperative agent for Carter County Cooperative Agriculture Extension Agency. Okay, we're looking at this being Pollinator Month. What's the current situation? There was a period of time, and I don't know if this came up in any of the conversations. They were calling it hive syndrome, or that was creating a death of honeybees hives. I'm sorry. Yeah,
Honeybees, yes.
Yeah. Has that? I've not heard a lot about that recently.
It's still happening. It usually happens during the wintertime, and it's a combination of insects that feed on the honeybees, like varroa mites. There are a foul brood, which is a fungal pathogen. There are several different things that can contribute to that. And what usually happens is when when the hive senses that it's in danger, it will swarm.
Okay.
And so if it finds that there's a lot of varroa mites in the hive, or there's something else that's disturbing the hive, a lot of times they will swarm and go and find another location. And
They
that's
just
why,
leave.
yeah, you'll find a lot of dead bees inside the hive. But if you don't find the queen, what that means is that it swarmed and it went somewhere else.
That's right. They call it hive collapse, as
Right.
a collapsing hive. Okay. We've talked a lot about bees and pollination. What else is happening out there?
I have a workshop down at the Western Library next Monday night. So Monday, June 26th, I have a workshop, and we're going to talk about turf grass and what you can do with your turf grass. We'll talk a little bit about lawn maintenance. So at what height you want to mow the different species of grass that we generally grow around here, as well as irrigation and fertilization. So how often do you want to fertilize the different species of grass, and how often do you want to water? How much water do you want to apply, especially since the price of water has gone up sky high down there in that area of the county. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and give people a better idea of what they can do to have the best possible lawn in their yard.
Real quickly, time for fertilization. I know that back in spring I fertilized my yard, my centipede. What's the status? When do we start thinking about fertilization again?
Generally, you want to fertilize your centipede in May or mid to early May, and then again in early July, so around the 4th of July.
Okay.
And that should be all you would need to apply as far as fertilizer to your centipede.
All
Most of our other lawn species that we grow are going to be fertilized May, June, July, August, and I think there's one that actually gets a fertilization in September.
All right. So all of you out there with centipede, I'll see you out there around the 4th of July. I thank you very much.
All right.
Okay. How are you, or what are you hearing from the gardeners? How are they doing?
A lot of gardens, because it's been so cool, the plants aren't as big, but they're still producing. And so, like I had mentioned before, the cooler weather kind of delays the plants or slows down the growth. But they're picking up now that we're getting a little bit of heat, so things are growing a little bit faster and getting bigger.
Blueberries coming in?
Blueberries are coming in. I've seen blueberries at the market from some of the local blueberry growers. So, yeah, blueberries are coming in. Blackberries are just about on their way out. So there's probably still a few blackberries that are being produced, but a little bit in, a little bit out.
Okay. And other than that, basically, it looks like a pretty natural or a normal summer at this point.
I think from here on, it'll probably be more normal than what it has been up to this point, because it has been cool. So strawberries lasted a little bit longer. A lot of the other fruits and vegetables were delayed just a little bit, but I think overall it's going to be a pretty good summer.
And we can't complain. We've had some good rain.
We have had good rain finally, and that was good. I didn't realize it, but the people up in the foothills have had more rain than we have, and so
Really?
they were like, "We don't need any more rain." And I'm like, "We send it my way. We could use some more." But I did also notice on my way back from Hickory that a lot of the peach producers have got their peach stands set up with peaches, so
Peaches are
fresh
looking
peaches
good?
are coming in.
Oh, okay. All right. We're talking with Sean Banks of Carteret County Cooperative Agriculture Extension Agency. Do we have a lot of peaches in our immediate area?
Not in our immediate area. A lot of the peaches are going to be a little bit further up. I think they really start in Wayne County,
County?
Lenore County, and then go through the Piedmont.
Okay. I'm looking forward to some peaches. That'd be great. All right. Sean, as always, thank you very much for being part of this. Again, we're talking Coastal Gardener with Sean Banks of Carteret County Cooperative Agriculture.